Let's get some PowerApps design ideas from Ryan. So today Ryan's going to join us again and he's going to talk to us about design, and he's going to show us how he's going to take a Figma design that he found that he really liked and converted that into a PowerApps design. So let's just jump over to Ryan so he can explain how this all works.
Well, hey everyone, today we are going to build this really cool design that illustrates 3 modern design ideas: the use of SVG icons, the use of really cool HTML-based gradients, and then the use of a completely custom font. That's right, this is not a built-in PowerApps font. This is a custom font embedded right into our Canvas app. And we're going to show you how to do all 3 of those things today. I want to begin by demonstrating a really cool way to build Canvas apps, and that is off of someone else's design, and in particular in this case off of a Figma file. This design is built off of this design coming from Figma. And one of the really neat things about having files that come from Figma, whether you download it from a website that provides user interface templates that you could use as a foundation for your Canvas app, or maybe you even are able to work with a graphic designer who provides the files in Figma. What is really cool about using Figma files is that right in Figma, we get a lot of information that we need for designing our app. We get our colors for our backgrounds, we get our sizes, we get our positions, our X and Y coordinates. And so as we begin to build out this app today, we'll be able to use this Figma file as a starting point. Now, we're not going to start building from scratch as we sometimes do in our videos because there's a lot going on here. I'm going to walk you through a lot of the key points that you can then use to apply in your own designs. So as we get going here, we'll see that this main container in Figma has the 736 by 512 dimensions. And so we are able to come over here into our main container, and I'm able to immediately apply a 736 by 512 dimension. The border radius of this container is, let's see if we drill down into it, we can see that it has a 32 pixel corner radius. So we can come over here and we can see that our border radius has a 32 pixel radius. And so this is one of the really cool ways that we can use Figma files to accelerate our design process. And then we have our left container here. We can see that it also has a nice little border radius to it. Where is it? Let's see, I'm stuck over here. Here we are, 32 pixels, which also matches up with what's going on in our Figma file. And we can see right there that 32 pixel radius. But what we wanted to do now is jump into this very important concept of using SVG icons. So you can see that there are these little icons in our design. In fact, we'll zoom in here so we can see them a little better. And these are SVGs. Now, we can import graphics into a Canvas app with PNG files or GIF files or JPEGs, but a lot of times we want to import icons or other types of graphics in the SVG format. Now, why would we do that? So SVG icons are a incredibly small file, generally speaking. They are vector graphics, meaning that they are fully scalable. You can see that no matter how far in I zoom, our lines, our curves are perfectly clean and crisp. And that is because they are vector graphics as opposed to JPEGs, PNGs, and GIFs, which are raster graphics. They are individual pixels, and as you blow them up, those pixels get blurry and pixelated and distorted. But SVG graphics, that is not the case. They will look perfect no matter what scale you're at, no matter how small you are or how large you are. And I also mentioned they're very small file sizes. That is because they are actually HTML text. So for example, I can come in here and I can drill down to one of these icons. I can right click on it and say copy as SVG. Then I can come over in here into VS Code. And as you can see, it's just what looks to be HTML text. And that is the extent of the file for that little lightning bolt SVG icon. And so we're going to use this to our advantage, this size and this portability in our Canvas app. Now, let me answer one more question, which might be, why in the world would we use these kinds of icons when there are tons of icons built into PowerApps? Well, great question. Well, I want to show an illustration here. So we've got these various icons going on. We've got a lightning bolt, we've got a brain. And if I go up to the insert menu and I look at our icons, I don't see any brain icons or lightning bolt icons. And so sometimes we just need icons that are not provided in the icon library with PowerApps. But the other thing I want to point out is that all of the icons provided by PowerApps are very square, have very sharp edges. There are no like rounded corners with these icons. They're kind of boxy. They just lack maybe the style that you would want for your Canvas app. And so that's why we would use SVG icons. Now, where can you get these icons? There are tons of great free repositories of icons. There's the Bootstrap repository. There's Google. Google has its own materials library of icons. You can download them through Figma. There are lots of resources out there. Just check them out when you search online, and you can import these libraries of icons that fit the style that you desire. And so we're going to do that right here in our Canvas app. So what I like to do is I like to come into the formulas section of the app, and I like to create a section for my SVGs, and I'll just name them. I'll copy and paste the SVG code in and give them each a name. And the way we would do that in Figma is we would come in, and let's just do this brain one. We would right click, say copy as SVG, go into VS Code, and then paste. Now, one important thing we need to do before we can use this in a Canvas app is we need to remove all the double quotes and change them into single quotes. So I'm going to hit Control H on my Windows keyboard here, and I'm going to replace double quotes with single quotes. I'm going to click on replace all, and now then all of my double quotes are single quotes. I'll copy that. I will come back over into the Canvas app, and then if you were creating this afresh, you would say whoops, what are we doing here? NF icon brain equals, and then an opening double quote. You paste your SVG code in, and then a closed double quote. And now then, this SVG icon is ready to go. Now, I've already done this with the other three. I've got my 4 icons copied and pasted in, and they're all ready to go. To create this little gallery, we could just do, stacking containers, or use a vertical container and stack each one of these. But since they're all kind of the same, we're going to actually use a gallery. So in order to create this gallery here, we need 4 pieces of information. We need our color for our text. We need what the text is going to be itself. We are going to need our icon, and then we're going to need this score. You can see that we've got an 80 out of 192, 61, 73, which, by the way, we'll give you a little tip here in a little bit on how we get this black and gray in a single PowerApps control. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here back into our formulas section, and we're going to create a table that has our 4 pieces of information: our color, our text, our score, and then the variable name. Well, it's not really a variable. In our named formula section here are names for each of our icons. Now, how do we get this text? This is another great Figma tip. So we can just click on this piece of text. We'll click on the fill. We'll click on the properties, and there is that hex color. Same thing over here. We can grab that yellow and click on the properties, and there's the hex color. And so we'll be able to copy and paste those in to our color properties here. If you wanted to use RGBA, you could do the same thing. I'm just using hex colors that will pass into the color value expression, and that's how we're going to create our gallery. So we have our pieces of information in this lovely NF gallery table. We come over into our gallery. Our items are NF gallery, and then each of the items is able to have that property. The text, the color for this text is set by color value, and this item dot color, and then our SVG icon. Now, an important thing, I'm using this term SVG icon. You can use SVGs for any kind of image, but they're very often icons. And you can't just come in here and say insert icon, and we'll just grab this 3D printing one. And then for the icon, I'm going to say this item dot icon. Well, there's nothing. It doesn't work. The icon control in PowerApps is specifically expecting one of the pre-built PowerApps icons. And so in order to use our SVGs, we can't actually use an icon control. We actually have to use an image control, and we have to supply into the image property this code right here. Now, we've got this data, image, SVG, XML, whatever. Look, I don't memorize this. I Google it more often than not. I pull up one of my other apps. I copy it. I paste it right in. You can even go to ChatGPT and say, what is the code that I need to have on the front end of the image property of a Canvas app in order to use an SVG? And it'll provide you this code right here. This is basically telling the image control what kind of data it's about to receive. And then once you have put that in, we will have an ampersand to concatenate, and then we will use this encode URL expression, and then the SVG icon code itself. This is basically the HTML from the opening SVG tag to the closing SVG tag, all wrapped in this encode URL expression. And once we have that in there, it's going to render this beautiful SVG icon. So make sure that we do it that way. Use the image control, use this code with encode URL, and that is really all you need to be able to embed SVG icons right into your Canvas app. Now, before we go on to this HTML text control and the beautiful gradients we've created, let me give you one little bonus tip, and that is this score keeper. Now, normally, if we have text that is going to have two different colors to it, we would have to create two different labels, and that just adds bloat to our app. And this strategy I'm going to show you right here gives us a couple of benefits. One, we have one HTML text control, and inside of it, we have a bold text tag, and then a div that aligns to the right. And then you'll notice, by the way, that we open this line with a $sign, meaning that we're now going to enable string interpolation. So in order to put this item.score right in line, rather than having to close the string and add a concatenation character, we just enclose it in the mustaches or curly brackets, whatever you want to call it, and then we can put in our data. So we have our score, and then it's going to be in the default color, which is black. And then after it, we want this gray color. So we create a span, we set its style to a black at 50% opacity. So it's basically a 50% gray. And then the text itself, /100. And this allows us to have black and gray in a single control. The other thing this does is, what if our 100 was actually some kind of variable data? Let's say that, in one row, it was 10,000. Well, now then it is a larger piece of text, and we want the 80 to move along with the 100. If we were having two different labels, we would have to do, all sorts of wizardry to determine a variable width for that, 10,000 control, and then set the X position of the 80 relative to the 1,000. It would just get so complicated. But instead, we can use this HTML text control, and no matter how big that number is, unless it gets too big for the control itself, everything is going to size itself accordingly. And so this is a really great way to simplify and also add flexibility of design using the HTML text. So that's a little bonus tip there.
Hey, I missed talking to you guys, so I thought I'd jump in here real quick. Just to let you know that Ryan and Lindsay have an upcoming Extreme Makeover Power Apps edition where they spend a whole one day teaching you guys all this design stuff. They also talk about usability, planning, and just help you be better designers to make prettier Power Apps. If you're interested, that's coming up here in April. So check that out at training.powerapps911.com and just click on the live training link and you'll see it listed.
But let's move on now to our next design idea, which is this beautiful set of gradients. We've actually got two gradients going on. We've got the background gradient, and then we have our circle that has its own gradient, which again is matching right up with what we've got going on here in Figma. So let's zoom out a little bit and let's look at what's going on. So in our main container, we have this gradient here. We'll click on the properties of it. We'll click on linear, and we can see we have three colors: a starting color, this kind of midway through color. Actually, it's 27% of the way through, and then the closing color. And so what we need to do is we need to get the cascading style sheet, the CSS code that generates this kind of a gradient. Now you're like, I'm not an HTML pro. I don't even know what you're talking about. What CSS? It really doesn't matter. All you need to know is the word CSS so that you can go Google CSS gradient generator. And what you're going to do is you're going to find something like this. This is cssgradient.io. It's free to use. It's my favorite one because it's just so easy to use. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into Figma. We're going to grab our first color, which is this one right here. I'm not even sure what this one is here for, but it's not being used. We're using this one. We'll copy the hex value. You notice its stop is at 0%, so it's the first color. We come up to CSS gradient. We click on our first one here. We paste in that hex color. We'll come back, grab the second one. Notice that it's at 27%. And we're going to paste it in here. Our stop is at 27%. We'll come over here for the third one, copy it, and our stop is at 100%, and we paste it in, and boom, off we go. Now, this is not a left to right gradient. This is an up and down gradient. So we're going to set our color here at 0. But you'll notice that the dark color is at the top, and in our sample, the light color is at the top. So we need to go 180 degrees. And so then that will put our light color up top, dark color at the bottom. We will come down here, hit copy to clipboard, come back over to our Canvas app, and you'll notice that I've created inside this left-hand container, I have created an HTML text control with a couple of very important things. First of all of our padding values are set to 0. The width is parent.width. The height is parent.height +1. And I'm going to explain the +1 in just a minute, so bear with me. And then inside the HTML text itself, we've created a div. Again, we're using string interpolation because we're going to put a couple of key pieces of information in here. So we have an HTML div tag where the style is set to the background that we just copied from our CSS gradient. So I'm hitting Control V right now, just pasted that in, which is what you will do. That gives us our background gradient. And then the height and the width of the div has to be set to the height and the width of the HTML text control. And so we do that by setting it to self.height -1. Now, why do we do that? If I remove that -1, a scroll bar shows up in our HTML text control, which we don't want. So we have to do height -1. Now, when we do that, that is actually going to make the div with our HTML gradient 1 pixel smaller than the overall HTML text control, which is why when we set the height, we set it to parent.height +1. If I set it at 0, if you zoom in here, you will see a little tiny white line at the bottom. But by setting the HTML text control to 1 pixel taller, it's going to basically extend beyond the height of the parent container and hide that 1 pixel. Now, if you watched our last video that I did on the channel with HTML text controls, I solved this problem a different way. And so if you want to see another way to deal with the HTML text control in this regard, go back and watch that video and you can learn that second method. So here we are back into our HTML text. We have our self.height being the height of the div, and the width is self.width. And that gives us an HTML text control that fills the entire space. For this circle, very, very similar strategy. Now you'll notice that it's inside a circle container where the border radius is set to self.height -2. And each one of the radius properties has that same thing. If you set the radius of any container to half of its height or width, if they're all set that way, it's going to create a perfect circle. We add an HTML text control inside of that one, and we also set a gradient just like we did with the other one. So if we go back to Figma and we double click on our circle control, you will see here that we have a linear gradient where we have 2 colors going on, the main color and then a color that goes to transparency. So it has a color amount, but its opacity is 0. So let me just show you how you create that one because it's a little different type. So we'll grab our main color and we'll go up to our CSS gradient and we'll take our first color. We only have 2 colors here, so we're going to get rid of the second one. And then for the second color, here is the color. and it is going to be a stop of 100, but you'll notice that the opacity is 0. That's our alpha property. And in this case, we are still going from solid to transparent, so we'll keep it at 180 degrees. We'll copy that to the clipboard. We come in here and paste our background in, and bada bing, bada bang, there is our cool look. So these are two really cool ways to use HTML gradients to create a really beautiful effect. Last tip, we are just going to touch on it because it's actually quite complex. And if this is something that you'd like me to do a deep dive into, please comment it on the video. We'll do a full video on embedding custom fonts in your Canvas apps, because normally we are limited to the fonts provided by PowerApps, this list here. There is a way to get access to a few other fonts, but if you have, let's say that your company has a custom font that is part of your brand and that you would like to be able to sprinkle here and there in your app. Well, what we end up doing is not actually using a text label at all. We use an image, and we use your actual font file to generate an SVG of that text rendered using your font. And in fact, if we go into our formulas here, we'll come down past our fonts and we find this crazy gibberish of code. This is the base 64 text-based rendering of your font file. In our case, we're using a font that is called Vegan Style, and I have used an online base 64 converter in order to take that font file and convert it to base 64. There's a program called the Font Transcoder or Transfonter that does a great job of this. It will take your font file and generate a base 64 text string out of it. And so you'd bring it in here, bring it into your Canvas app. And then I have created this little UDF, user-defined function called UDF custom font that gets a number of different parameters that are needed and generates, notice, I'm sure you recognize this right here, our data image SVG, an encode URL, and then an SVG HTML tag that starts with SVG, ends with SVG, and in between is all this stuff that I'm not going to go into right now. But if you wanted to use this cool user-defined function property, or user-defined function, you are going to create an image like we've done in our previous example, and put this UDF as the property for the image. And here's our text, yay, custom, and put whatever text you want, and it is going to render it out. You can set your font size to whatever you want here. It automatically centers it. If you don't want it centered, this is the align middle property, we can say false, and that's going to make it left aligned. And if you have fonts like this that have really big swoops down below, you may have to adjust this particular piece of it right here to make sure that nothing gets clipped off at the bottom. And you're going to set your the size of the font itself to the width and height of your actual image. And this is another little UDF I've created where if since this is HTML, it's expecting your color, generally speaking, in a hex code. You can use an RGBA function in there, but I like to use hex codes. And so if you have an actual PowerApps color, you can generate the hex from it, and it's going to pop it in. And so at the end of the day, you can use this cool little function inside of an image tag to use any font file that you want, whether it's a true type font or an open type font, a web font. All of these can be imported into your Canvas app, and then you are able to use custom fonts. You're not going to use this for every font in your app. This is going to be for those little moments where you want to sprinkle in some style, whether you want to have something on brand or you want to have some kind of a big moment where you call out some kind of a heading with a special custom font. That's what you would use this for. So again, if you want us to deep dive into how we create this and what goes on there, put that in the comments and we'll talk more about custom fonts. So all of these tips and tricks, I hope you will apply these to your own apps. You can actually download this actual file if you want to be able to reverse engineer it by joining our YouTube library on our PowerApps 911 University program. Tons of great training there, and of course access to all of our apps that we create for the YouTube videos. Thanks for watching. Hope this was a help.